Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for a historical thriller unlike anything else you've ever heard. Just imagine being locked in a cold, unforgiving cell. Your life is literally hanging by a thread, and you know your only way out is a lie so massive, so absolutely audacious, that it's going to require an entire fleet to pull off. It's wild, right? This is the captivating story of a captive who managed to orchestrate a daring heist right under the nose of a tyrant. And in the process, he smuggled the seeds of an entire civilization across a treacherous sea. It's an incredible tale of survival, cunning, and monumental historical shifts that forever changed the ancient world.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a political prisoner's daring escape birth a completely new civilization? The stakes here are absolutely immense. We're talking about life and death on a grand scale. The ingenuity involved in navigating these deadly political waters is truly mind-blowing. One wrong word, one slight miscalculation, and our protagonist would have faced immediate execution. No trial, just gone. But instead, his desperate bid for freedom forged an enduring legacy that is still with us today.
Part 1. The Escape of Shu Shi.
So picture this. It's around 260 BC, and the land is totally fractured by intense rivalries and endless brutal warfare. Our protagonist here is Shu Shi, a brilliant scholar from the newly defeated state of Qi. Now, the sovereign who'd conquered these lands, through blood and iron, mind you, was a ruler consumed by deep, unending suspicion. After narrowly surviving numerous assassination attempts and crushing countless enemies to unify the realm, the guy was incredibly paranoid. He feared rebellion above literally everything else. His knights were plagued by the thought of his subjugated peoples rising against him. And because of his vast intellect and, his origins from a conquered state, Shu Shi was deemed a severe existential threat. So naturally, he finds himself stripped of his standing and thrown into a cell by this profoundly paranoid sovereign. But here's the thing about Shu Shi. He possessed a brilliant, calculating mind. He knew this sovereign had a desperate, all-consuming weakness, a terrifying obsession with achieving immortality. The ruler wanted to reign forever and feared death more than any mortal enemy. So, Shu Shi leverages this weakness in a massive gamble. Because, let's be real, if the sovereign saw through the lie, it would mean a slow, agonizing execution. Undeterred, he actually petitions the sovereign for Saikai. Now, ostensibly, this was an intricate religious purification ritual strictly required to seek out the mythical elixir of life on the ruler's behalf. But cleverly, Shu Shi utilized this profound religious guise to secure his own literal, physical release from prison. He took his captor's greatest, most irrational desire and turned it into his own personal key to freedom.
Part 2. The Secret Repeating Crossbows.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer audacity of Shu Shi's plan. It's staggering. After returning from a preliminary voyage, he needed an ironclad excuse for why he hadn't yet found this elixir of immortality. Obviously, he couldn't just say he failed. That meant certain death. So he fabricates a wild, wonderfully unbelievable story. He looks the most powerful ruler in the world right in the eye and claims he had indeed found the immortals, but a massive, terrifying sea creature blocked his path. I'm serious. He literally tells the sovereign, "I pray for excellent archers and repeating crossbows to shoot the giant shark." The absurdity is incredible, right? A giant shark standing between a mighty sovereign and eternal life? Yet, by playing on the sovereign's desperate paranoia and blinding desire for eternity, he completely tricks him into handing over the most restricted weaponry of the entire era. Just look at the immense scale of what he procured. He told the sovereign that a great deity in the sea demanded a grand tribute in exchange for the elixir. He specifically requested youths of noble blood, master artisans, and rare seeds. And the sovereign, eager beyond measure for immortality, actually provides them. 3,000 youths, hundreds of skilled craftsmen, and the 5 essential grains. But notice the repeating crossbows. The great deity in the sea never actually asked for those. So under the impenetrable guise of a divine mission, Shu Shi effectively smuggled out the finest mines, the ultimate agricultural foundation, and the most advanced, heavily restricted armaments of the era, all at once. Talk about the heist of a lifetime.
And the impact of these repeating crossbows absolutely cannot be overstated. These were the ultimate restricted armaments of their time. They were capable of continuous, rapid fire that completely outmatched traditional bows. No ordinary force was permitted to possess them. So when brought across the sea, these weapons granted Shu Shi's people an overwhelming military supremacy over literally any local opposition. In fact, the transfer of this specific weaponry is the exact reason the forces of Yamato maintained an undefeated domestic record for over 1,400 years. It fundamentally altered the balance of power in the ancient world, ensuring the survival and dominance of a people who were originally meant to be mere sacrifices to a tyrant's delusion.
Part 3. Negotiation in the Genkai Nara.
This epic migration, well, it wasn't just a sudden, overnight escape. Let's trace the timeline of this massive endeavor. Back in 219 BC, Shushi made his first voyage and had his initial encounter across the waters. Then came 9 long years of preparation. Think about the sheer, terrifying logistical nightmare of this for a second. A decade-long effort, meticulously gathering 3,000 youths, stockpiling immense resources, and coordinating hundreds of master craftsmen, all while hiding his true intentions from a deeply paranoid sovereign who had spies literally everywhere. One whisper of treason over those 9 years would have doomed them all. Finally, in 210 BC, he made the second, permanent voyage, departing the sovereign's domain never, ever to return.
So where exactly were they heading with this massive fleet? The island of Iki. It's perfectly positioned right in the treacherous waters of the Genkai Nara. This island acted as the physical, imposing domain of Taka Amahara. I really want to firmly ground us in this ancient geography for a moment. Iki, surrounded by the churning, dangerous currents of the Genkai Nara, was the exact crucial location where this historic maritime intersection occurred, bridging 2 very different worlds.
Let's actually read directly from the historical records to fully grasp the tension of this encounter. So the great deity of Taka Amahara stops Zushi's heavily armed fleet and proclaims, "You are a messenger of the Western sovereign? Your sovereign's gifts are meager. You may look but not take." Wow. The great deity was completely unfazed by the fleet. He demanded the ultimate tribute, not just trinkets or empty promises, but the people, the skills, the very foundation of civilization that Zushi had brought with him. This was a strict exchange for entry into the protected lands of Taka Amahara.
Part 4. Settling the vast wetlands.
Following this incredibly high-stakes negotiation, the fleet finally moved from the turbulent sea to the safety of the mainland, seeking a permanent home. And this brilliantly illustrates the geographic transition to the plains and broad marshes of the Unga River Basin. This specific, sprawling basin perfectly matches the ancient descriptions of the final destination where Zushi and his people permanently settled. It was exactly the safe haven they had been desperately searching for, far, far away from the reach of that paranoid sovereign.
But transforming this wild, untamed land, that was a monumental task that tested their absolute limits. First, they had to systematically survey the muddy, flooded basin, which was entirely inhospitable. Then, they imparted the highly advanced wet rice agriculture and intricate irrigation techniques they had so carefully smuggled from the continent. Through sheer, grueling physical labor, we're talking digging canals by hand, moving tons of earth, and their shared knowledge, they transformed what were hostile, unlivable wetlands into a prosperous, thriving agricultural center. They literally turned a muddy, waterlogged swamp into the enduring foundation of Yamato. It's just phenomenal.
Part 5. The gift of written words.
If you contrast the historical records before and after this migration event, the cultural shift is undeniable, and honestly quite startling. Pre-migration, early oral traditions were incredibly limited. They consisted mostly of brief, name-only recitations, basically just a lineage list saying who begat whom, completely lacking in any real narrative detail, emotion, or context. It was a pretty fragile way of remember the past. But post-migration, we suddenly see explosive, highly detailed and dynamic historical narratives filled with rich storytelling, political maneuvering, and deep, deep cultural memory.
So, the crucial point here is that this monumental leap was caused by the ultimate gift: written words. The bestowal of Chinese characters fundamentally transformed Yamato from a society of fleeting, fragile memory into a complex civilization with a permanent recorded chronicle of time. The ability to write down laws, to record harvests, and to tell their own grand story. That was the final piece of the puzzle. It was this profound introduction of writing that truly cemented the new civilization's enduring legacy for millennia to come.
And that leaves us with a profound question to ponder. How did the survival of a defeated people fleeing a deeply paranoid sovereign fundamentally weave the enduring fabric of ancient Yamato? This grand heist, a literal giant shark lie, and an epic migration form the very roots of a culture. It really invites us to completely question everything we thought we knew about the origins of ancient history and the surprising ways that human desperation can spark such profound creation. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the past.
In 221 BC, the most ruthlessly paranoid man on the face of the earth did something completely unthinkable.
He really did. He handed over the keys to his empire's most classified military technology.
Right, and he didn't hand it over to, like, a trusted general or a loyal family member?
No, not at all. He handed to a man who was literally sitting on death row.
It's wild. Today, you are joining us for a deep dive into what is honestly the greatest heist in history.
The greatest heist, the most audacious legal manipulation, and, well, the largest successful relocation program we've ever seen.
Exactly. We are talking about the survival of an entire civilization, and it was all orchestrated by one single political prisoner.
Yeah, and it's a scenario that defies logic, until you really look at the physical mechanics of how he executed it.
Right, because we are so accustomed to the myth. You hear the story of, like, a wandering mystic looking for magic potions.
Exactly.
Correct.
But when you strip away that folklore and look at the physical history, the archaeological bedrock,
And the bureaucratic records.
right, the bureaucratic records, the military history, a completely different reality emerges.
Welcome to the deep dive. We have an absolutely massive stack of research on the table today.
It's quite a stack.
Yeah. We are pulling from intensive textual analysis of ancient Chinese chronicles, specifically the Shiji, which are the records of the Grand Historian, and the Huhanshu, the Book of the Later Han.
And we're combining all of that text with hard geological data and archaeological excavations directly from the Japanese archipelago.
Right. Our mission today, the reason we are doing this, is to unpack the true staggering achievements of a man whose real name was Shufu.
Jofutsu. And, that name itself is the very first piece of physical evidence we have to anchor ourselves to.
Because the mythological figure you might have heard of is usually called Shufu.
Right, the wizard who supposedly sailed off to find the elixir of immortality, but the official state records of the Qin dynasty.
The actual bureaucratic documents.
Yeah, the rigorous bureaucratic documents, they consistently refer to him by his true name.
Jofutsu. So we are putting the wizard aside today.
We are. We're looking at the master geopolitical strategist.
Our goal here is to show you how Jofutsu engineered the survival of a noble bloodline that was, well, basically on the verge of extinction.
And in doing so, how he fundamentally upgraded the civilization of the Japanese archipelago.
But, okay, to understand the escape, we really have to understand the cage he was in.
The context is everything here.
Right. So the year is 221 BC. The Qin dynasty has just unified China.
And they didn't do it through diplomacy, let's just say that.
No, not at all. They did it through absolute systematic violence.
It was a unification achieved by the total subjugation of rival states. I mean, the Qin military machine was unprecedented.
In its efficiency and its brutality.
Exactly. And Jofutsu was from the state of Qi.
Which is a crucial detail.
Right, because Qi was the very last state to hold out against the Qin.
So the state of Qi falls, and Jofutsu is swept up in the aftermath.
Yeah.
But I want to pause here for a second, because I was looking at the geopolitical climate, and it wasn't just a matter of, like, changing out the flags on the castles.
No, the Qin dynasty's approach was total erasure.
So I want you to put yourself in that cell for a moment. The state of Qi has fallen. You are locked up.
And the people who conquered you aren't just taking your land.
Right. They are actively burning your history. They are burying your scholars.
They are trying to eliminate your entire way of life.
It's terrifying.
It is. And this requires us to really elevate our understanding of what this conflict actually was.
Because it wasn't merely a territorial dispute, was it?
No, it was a profound ideological clash. A war between two entirely different frameworks for human civilization.
Okay, let's break that down.
So on one side, you have Jofutsu. He was a leading intellectual belonging to the Eastern Yi lineage.
Right, and this lineage was connected to the ancient three sovereigns.
Yes, and they ruled through what was called the Huang system.
Okay, the Huang system. When I was going through the notes, it sounded almost utopian compared to the Qin.
It really was a stark contrast.
It was a governance based on, well, technological grace, right?
Exactly. In the Huang system, leadership was intrinsically tied to physical contributions to human survival.
And flourishing.
Right. Think about the historical figures from antiquity who were revered in this culture.
The inventors.
Yes, the ones who invented the drilling of wood to create fire.
Which fundamentally changed human digestion and survival.
Completely. They were the ones who figured out the domestication of livestock, the turning of the soil.
The invention of agriculture.
Exactly. So legitimacy didn't come from who had the biggest army.
It came from who could provide the most innovation for the community.
Precisely. You became a leader by consensus because your inventions literally kept people alive.
I mean, that's a framework of peace and civilization building.
It is. There was no embedded concept of violent usurpation of power in that system.
But then you have the conqueror, Qin Shi Huang.
And he represented the absolute apex of the Dai system.
Right, and the Dai system is like the polar opposite.
It is a brutal framework. It's rooted in violent revolution, hyperlegalism, and military subjugation.
Yeah, the logic of the hegemon.
You conquer by the sword, you enforce compliance through a terrifyingly strict legal code.
And you maintain your grip on power through fear.
Fear and the absolute physical destruction of any rival bloodline.
Which brings us back to the sheer terror of Jōfutsu's reality in 221 BC.
Right, he wasn't some court magician doing parlor tricks.
No. He was a highly dangerous political prisoner. He was the intellectual manifestation of the Huang system.
The exact system Qin Shi Huang was desperate to erase.
And Qin Shi Huang's paranoia is legendary. I mean, the man survived multiple assassination attempts.
He slept in a different location every night.
So he rounds up all the intellectuals, the Fangxi from the defeated states.
He had to. From the perspective of the Dai system, intellectuals from a consensus-based society are the ultimate threat.
Because they hold the administrative knowledge.
And the historical memory of a different way of living.
So Jōfutsu is sitting in a Qin prison. And he isn't just fearing for his own life.
No, he is actively watching the impending extinction of the ancient noble Huang bloodline.
He knows the executioner is coming.
And when that happens, the descendants of the people who brought fire and agriculture to civilization...
Oh, yeah, they will be wiped from the face of the earth.
It's a terrifying psychological space to inhabit.
Completely. You have no weapons, no army, no leverage.
You are in the darkest hole of the most heavily guarded empire on the planet.
So the question is, how do you fight back?
Well, you use the very system that imprisoned you against the man who built it.
You weaponize their bureaucracy.
Exactly.
Okay, this is where the story pivots from a tragedy to an absolute masterclass in manipulation.
It really is brilliant.
I was reading the breakdown of the Shiji text, and there is a specific legal mechanism mentioned here.
The Xingshu.
Right. But how does a death row political prisoner even get the attention of the emperor?
That's the beauty of it.
I initially thought, okay, maybe he bribes a guard or causes a riot.
But the texts say he submitted a shangshu, which is a formal written petition.
A written petition. And we have to really understand the administrative reality of the Qin Empire to see why this works.
We do. Because the Qin didn't just rule by brute force. They ruled by an incredibly dense, strict, legalistic code.
Every action, every punishment, every request had to be documented.
Exactly. For a prisoner locked in a cell, the only legally recognized method to initiate contact with the ruling apparatus
was to file the proper paperwork.
Yes. So he literally writes a bureaucratic memo from a dark cell.
But a guard doesn't just hand a memo from a political prisoner directly to the emperor, right?
No, it would go through layers of magistrates and prison administrators.
So how does it get to the top?
The contents of the shangshu were designed to guarantee it would make it all the way up.
It wasn't just a plea for mercy.
No. It contained a highly specific request for zaiji.
Right, a zaiji.
No.
Now, the standard translation for this is like fasting or purification.
Which is how most people read it.
And when I first read that, I thought it was completely absurd.
Right. A guy on death row asking to fast.
Exactly. The man is facing execution, and he's submitting a formal legal petition for a juice cleanse.
It makes no sense if you look at it that way.
But our sources take a physical history approach and decode this term entirely differently.
Yes. Relying purely on modern, literal translations of ancient bureaucratic terms leads you astray.
So what did it actually mean?
If we look at the Han legal codes and the administrative realities of the era, zaiji wasn't about spiritual meditation.
Or skipping meals.
Right. It was a highly specific administrative euphemism. It meant a legal release from prison.
Right, really. It was essentially a parole request.
Yes. It was a request to be legally cleansed of one's criminal status.
Oh, wow.
In the heavily structured society of the Qin, being a prisoner meant you were tainted.
You had a specific legal designation.
That stripped you of your rights. So to ask for zaiji was to ask the state to formally wash away that criminal taint.
So that you could interact with society again.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes so much more sense mechanically. He is filing a formal petition to be pardoned.
Yes.
But Qin Shi Huang is ruthless. He doesn't grant pardons to leading intellectuals of rival systems just because they filed the correct paperwork.
Of course not. There has to be a hook.
Right. What is Jofutsu offering that forces the most paranoid man in the world to sign that release paper?
He offers the one thing the conqueror cannot take by force.
Immortality.
He offers immortality. Jofutsu knew the psychological profile of his captor intimately.
Qin Shi Huang had conquered the known world. He commanded vast armies.
But he was deeply, pathologically terrified of death.
He realized that all his military might was useless against his own mortality.
Precisely. So Jofutsu writes this petition, and he packages his legal request for pardon with the ultimate con.
He tells the emperor, I know where the elixir of immortality is.
It's on 3 magical mountains in the sea.
But, he says, I cannot go get it for you while I carry the legal taint of a prisoner.
You must grant me Zeiji so I can lead an expedition.
It is flawlessly executed.
He appeals directly to the pragmatic, self-serving nature of the Dia system.
He turns the emperor's paranoia into his own personal escape vehicle.
And through this single legal maneuver, Jofutsu transitioned his status
From a death row political prisoner destined to be forgotten
to the supreme commander of a state-funded expedition.
He literally turned his executioner into his venture capitalist. It's breathtaking.
It really is.
But, getting out of prison and getting on a boat is only step one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, honestly, if you just escape with a few boats and some farming tools, you haven't really solved the problem.
No, you're just delaying it.
Right. If they land on a new shore with no defenses, the next warlord they encounter with bronze weapons will just enslave them or wipe them out.
They don't just need a getaway car. They need a massive deterrent.
Which brings us to the heist.
The Great Heist.
The sources point out a fascinating chronological detail in the records. There is a 9-year gap between Jofutsu's first voyage and his second, final voyage.
9 years.
When you hear the myth, it sounds like he just tricked the emperor, hopped on a boat the next day, and vanished.
But a 9-year gap means something entirely different was happening.
It tells us that this was a massively funded, highly coordinated, state-sponsored enterprise.
He wasn't sneaking away in the dead of night. For nearly a decade, he was operating under the official mandate of the Qin Empire.
He was utilizing their shipyards, their timber, their logistical networks to build a colossal fleet.
And keeping that cover story alive for 9 years requires unbelievable psychological stamina.
I can't even imagine. You have Qin supervisors watching you, reporting back to the capital.
But during this time, Jofutsu realizes he needs that deterrent.
He needs a weapon that will guarantee the safety of his people forever.
So he goes back to Qin Shi Huang with a new problem.
He says, I know exactly where the immortals are, but we hit a roadblock.
There are these giant fish, massive sharks, blocking the maritime route.
He claims his regular sailors are terrified and can't get past them.
It sounds almost comical to a modern ear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Giant sharks blocking the path to immortality.
Right. I actually stopped and questioned this when I was reading.
It seems like such an obvious lie.
Yeah, Qin Shi Huang is a brilliant, ruthless tactician. He conquered every rival state.
And we were supposed to believe he just bought the shark story.
You're telling me he blindly believed that giant sharks were the only thing standing between him and eternal life?
Well, we have to remember the psychology of desperation. Qin Shi Huang wanted to believe it.
He needed it to be true.
And Jofutsu framed it not as a magical problem, but as a tactical military problem.
And military problems are exactly what the Qin Empire knows how to solve.
Exactly. Jofutsu says, I don't need magic to beat the sharks. I need your elite maritime archers.
And I need a very specific piece of hardware, the Liandu.
The Liandu.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the mechanics of this.
Because this isn't just a slightly better bow and arrow.
No. This is the repeating crossbow.
Yes, the repeating crossbow.
The Liandu was the absolute apex of military technology in the ancient world.
To understand why this was such an audacious request, you really have to understand how the weapon works physically.
Right. Think about a traditional archer. They have to draw an arrow from a quiver, nock it, draw back the high-tension string, aim, and fire.
It takes immense physical strength, years of training.
And the rate of fire is relatively slow.
But the repeating crossbow changes the math of warfare entirely.
Fundamentally. The Liandu features a top-mounted magazine containing multiple bolts.
Like a clip.
Yes. And it operates on a lever action mechanism. A soldier simply pushes and pulls a lever, which automatically drops a bolt into the firing groove.
It draws the string back to the catch and releases it.
Over and over again in rapid succession.
It's the ancient equivalent of a semi-automatic weapon.
Exactly. You can lay down a terrifying volume of suppressing fire.
And because of the mechanical advantage, The bolts hit with armor-piercing kinetic energy.
And here is the crucial part. Because the mechanical lever does the heavy lifting, you don't need soldiers with decades of archery training.
You can train a conscript to be deadly with a Liandu in a matter of weeks.
Yes. This weapon was the closely guarded state secret of the Qin military.
It was the backbone of their tactical superiority.
Exporting this technology, letting it leave the hands of the emperor's loyal forces, was strictly forbidden under penalty of death.
It was an ultra-classified state asset.
And Jofutsu asks for it.
He basically asks for the nuclear launch codes so he can go fishing.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the emperor is so consumed by his fear of death, so desperate for this potion,
That he actually authorizes the transfer.
he hands over his elite marksman and the classified Liandu technology to a former political prisoner.
It is the geopolitical heist of the century.
Jofutsu legally extracted the greatest military secret of the age and loaded it onto his outward-bound fleet.
But I want to track the physical reality of this. Does it actually matter once they leave the continent?
What do you mean?
We know stories get exaggerated over time. Can we prove that he actually took these weapons to the Japanese archipelago?
Oh, we absolutely can. This is where physical history provides the smoking gun.
Okay, tell me about the evidence.
Archaeologists excavating the Himehara Nishi site in Japan have uncovered ancient crossbow components.
Really?
Specifically, they found the intricate wooden stocks and the trigger mechanisms that date back to this exact era.
So they dug up the stolen technology.
They dug up the physical hardware, and the design of these components perfectly matches the advanced engineering of the Continental weapons.
This wasn't a parallel invention.
No, this was imported Apex military tech.
And the long-term implications of having this weapon on the archipelago must have been staggering.
Just think about it. If you land in a territory where the local populations are fighting with traditional bows, spears, or early bronze weapons,
And you roll out repeating armor-piercing crossbows.
it's not a battle. It's a foregone conclusion.
Right. This stolen technology provided the absolute geopolitical foundation for the new civilization.
Our sources heavily emphasize this point. It is the physical, tangible reason why the sovereign's army faced almost no resistance during later historical expansions.
Such as the subjugation of the Izumo region.
Exactly. They had an insurmountable, asymmetrical technological advantage.
Wow.
It is the core mechanical reason why the forces of Yamato remained undefeated domestically for nearly 1,400 years.
1,400 years. The acquisition of the Liandu wasn't just a clever trick to get past some imaginary sharks.
No, it was the deliberate securing of a millennium of military supremacy.
Okay, so let's look at the board right now. Jofutsu has his massive fleet built over 9 years.
He had the funding. He had the ultimate weapon.
The fleet finally set sail from the continent, leaving the Qin Empire behind.
But the open ocean is not an empty highway.
Right, you don't just sail a massive, heavily armed foreign fleet into new waters and expect nobody to notice.
They are intercepted.
The maritime corridors of the ancient world were highly contested, complex geopolitical arenas.
Yes. And the Chinese texts, the Shiji, describe a bizarre encounter during this voyage.
Jofutsu reports back that he met the great deity in the sea.
And the specific Chinese characters used are East there, great deity in the sea.
Now, when I first read that, my immediate thought was that we veered back into mythology.
That he's talking about a sea monster or a hallucination.
Or he's just spinning another lie to buy time.
That is the standard assumption. But if we systematically deconstruct the textual habits of Chinese historical chronicles, a glaring anomaly emerges.
What's the anomaly?
In ancient Chinese texts, when they describe the spiritual rulers of the ocean or mythological sea creatures, they almost universally use terms like dragon king or sea spirit.
So the phrase great deity is out of place.
It is extremely rare in this context. It doesn't fit the Chinese mythological lexicon at all.
Oh, interesting.
The presence of those specific characters in the official Shiji suggests that this isn't a Chinese concept being described.
It is a literal, unedited, phonetic transcription of a foreign title.
Exactly. This was a physical, face-to-face encounter in the notoriously treacherous waters of Genkai-nada.
Genkai-nada.
Yes. The fleet was intercepted by the actual historical supreme commander of the maritime nation of Taka Amahara.
Taka Amahara, which was centered on Iki Island.
Yes. And the great deity they encountered was the sovereign of that maritime power.
Takagi no Akami.
Right.
So I want to paint this picture for you. You have a tense, high-stakes diplomatic summit happening on the rolling waves of Genkai-nada.
So Jofutsu is commanding a massive state-of-the-art Qin fleet.
But he's intercepted by Takagi no Akami, who commands the maritime forces of Taka Amahara.
And he holds the absolute home field advantage in these incredibly difficult shifting currents.
It was a moment where the entire trajectory of history hung in the balance.
The great deity of Taka Amahara could have viewed this massive armed fleet as an invasion force.
And attempted to sink them.
Or bleed them dry through naval guerrilla warfare in waters the kin sailors didn't understand.
But they don't fight, they talk.
And Takagi no Akami lays out a demand.
He says he will grant them safe passage and settlement, but the toll is going to be astronomical.
He demands young men of noble birth, beautiful women, and master artisans.
Now, at first glance, that looks like a straightforward ransom or tribute.
Right. A warlord demanding hostages and skilled labor from a passing fleet.
That's exactly how I read it. A shakedown on the high seas.
But our physical history research reveals that this was actually a stroke of absolute strategic brilliance on both sides.
This wasn't just a toll.
It was an alibi.
Okay, an alibi.
By demanding this highly specific list of human capital, the great deity gave Jōfutsu the exact geopolitical excuse he needed to complete his mission.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following this. Jōfutsu takes this demand back to Qin Shi Huang.
He does. He returns to the emperor and says, "I found the immortals. They have the elixir."
But they are incredibly powerful.
And they are demanding a massive tribute before they will hand over the potion.
They demand youths of noble birth and master craftsmen. Oh, that is brilliant. He leverages the great deity's demand to extract the very people he has been trying to save this whole time.
Precisely. He goes back to the kin court and demands 3,000 royal youths.
But these weren't just random children swept up from the streets.
No. These were the last surviving heirs of the destroyed Eastern Yi states.
He was systematically rescuing the very bloodline that he was terrified of losing to the emperor's purges.
And alongside them, he demanded the master craftsmen.
The elite engineers of metallurgy, civil engineering, and advanced agriculture.
It blows my mind.
The level of deception is astronomical. They took a tense naval standoff and turned it into a mutually beneficial transfer of civilization.
The great deity of Taka Amahara recognized that this fleet possessed the advanced technology and human capital of the continent.
And he wanted that knowledge to upgrade his own nation.
And Jōfutsu desperately needed a safe haven where his people could survive.
They used the emperor's own obsessive paranoia to fund a massive state-sponsored rescue operation.
They packaged the survival of an ancient bloodline and the transfer of a highly advanced technological framework
into a fake tribute for a fake immortality potion?
It is arguably the greatest geopolitical negotiation in ancient history.
So the treaty is struck, the human capital is secured.
The massive fleet, now fully loaded with thousands of people, the elite 3,000 royal youths, the master artisans.
The repeating crossbows, the tools, and the seeds finally arrives.
They make landfall.
But this brings up a very physical, very immediate problem.
Yes, the logistics.
You can't just drop thousands of people onto an island and expect everything to be fine. They need to eat. They need to live.
The logistics of a sudden mass migration are a nightmare, particularly in the ancient world.
We track their initial arrival to Taka Amahara, which is Iki Island.
And our sources say that they brought with them the advanced techniques of wet rice cultivation.
They call it a miracle of food.
And we have to look at the climate context here, because they didn't just arrive during a normal Tuesday.
The environment was hostile.
Extremely hostile. The region was undergoing a period of severe climatic cooling.
Right. And for the indigenous hunter-gatherer populations and the early agricultural societies of the archipelago, this sudden drop in temperature meant horrific, systemic starvation.
The flora and fauna they relied on were dying off. The local population was crashing.
So when Jōfutsu's fleet arrives, they aren't just bringing refugees.
They are bringing a biological lifeline.
They brought a specific strain of highly productive wet rice.
Along with the advanced continental techniques required to cultivate it.
Right, because wet rice farming is incredibly resilient if engineered correctly.
It produces a massive caloric yield per acre compared to dry crops or foraging.
The introduction of this agriculture literally pulled the local population back from the brink of starvation.
It was a miracle of survival.
But there is a massive geographical catch. Iki Island is strategically vital.
It's a perfect maritime hub for controlling trade and naval movement.
But physically, it is just too small.
It lacks the immense flatlands required for large-scale wet rice cultivation.
You can feed a port city there, but you cannot sustainably support the thousands of new inhabitants Jofutsu brought.
Let alone the exploding local population that was suddenly rebounding due to the new food supply.
The carrying capacity of the island was maxed out.
They needed a much larger contiguous landmass.
So they have to mount a search operation, they need to find a new bread basket.
The Chinese texts mention that Jofutsu eventually settled his people in a place called Pingwan Guangze.
Which translates roughly to broad plains and vast wetlands.
Now, how do we pinpoint where that actually is? Japan has a lot of plains and wetlands.
This is where we rely heavily on geological tracing rather than just textual guessing, right?
Exactly. We aren't looking for a mythological paradise. We are looking for a specific topography that existed over 2,000 years ago.
And when you analyze the ancient geological layout of the region across from Iki Island, physical history maps Pingwan Guangze exactly to the Anga River Basin.
The Anga River Basin.
Yes, but you have to picture it as it was in antiquity, not as it is today.
Back then, it wasn't just a contained river. It was a massive, sprawling lagoon system known as the ancient Anga Bay.
Which covered what we now call the Nogata Plain.
It was a vast, waterlogged, highly dynamic environment.
Now, hold on. When I hear vast wetlands, I think of a great habitat for ducks and frogs.
Sure.
But for human settlement, it sounds like an absolute nightmare. It's a swamp.
It's prone to catastrophic flooding.
The soil is pure mud, and it's probably a breeding ground for waterborne diseases. Why would you move a rescued civilization into a peat bog?
Left to nature, you are absolutely right. It was a dangerous, uninhabitable peat bog.
So why there?
Remember the human capital that Jofutsu extracted from the emperor? He didn't just bring farmers.
He brought the master artisans and the elite civil engineers of the continent.
The people who know how to move earth and water.
Exactly. When these engineers looked at the Anga River Basin, they didn't see a swamp.
They saw canvas.
They possessed advanced continental civil engineering techniques that simply did not exist on the archipelago at that time.
They understood large-scale drainage, the construction of intricate irrigation canals.
The building of levees, and the mechanics of earth moving.
So they terraformed the landscape.
They completely engineered it. They systematically drained the dangerous bogs.
Redirected the water flow into manageable irrigation networks.
And transformed a hostile wetland into a massive, thriving, highly controlled agricultural hub.
They built the breadbasket that would feed the civilization of Yamato.
The scale of that labor is incredible.
It really is.
But as someone looking at the research, I have to ask, how can we be 100% sure they moved from Iki Island into this specific river basin?
Because written texts can be vague.
Right. Can we physically trace their steps? Do we have a trail of breadcrumbs?
We have something much more permanent than breadcrumbs. We have the Kamakanbo system.
Kamakanbo, I saw this in the archaeological data. This is a specific type of jar burial, right?
Correct. It is a highly distinctive method of burying the dead.
Instead of a wooden coffin or a simple pit, the deceased is placed inside massive, specially fired clay jars.
These jars are large enough to hold an adult human.
And this burial practice was a specific cultural and administrative hallmark of Jofutsu's group.
And because clay jars don't decompose like wood or bone, they stay in the geological record permanently.
So by archaeologically mapping the excavation sites of these Kamakanbo burials,
we can see the literal physical footprints of this civilization as they moved.
the data is striking. We see the burials start very densely on Iki Island.
Then we see them step across the sea to the coastal regions.
And finally, we see them concentrate incredibly densely, numbering in the thousands right into the Anga River Basin.
The spread of these massive clay jars maps perfectly onto the narrative of their migration and settlement.
We aren't just reading a story, we are tracking their movement through the Earth itself.
It gives me absolute chills.
It really does. We can follow the path of this rescued civilization by looking at where they laid their ancestors to rest in the soil.
But as amazing as the civil engineering was, and as powerful as the repeating crossbow was, our sources point to one final element.
They argue that the ultimate weapon Jofutsu brought wasn't made of wood and bronze.
And the ultimate treasure wasn't the rice?
No. The most powerful tool they brought was the ability to record time itself.
I want to talk about how we actually understand history. When we look back 1,000 years or 2,000 years, how do we know what happened?
We rely on records.
What happens to a society that doesn't have a written script?
I was looking closely at the Kojiki, which is one of the oldest historical texts in Japan. And there is a glaring, massive asymmetry in how the first part of the book is written compared to the rest.
It is one of the most fascinating textual shifts in ancient literature.
In the very beginning of the Kojiki, before the figure of Izanagi appears, and our research strongly correlates Izanagi as the mythological representation of Jofutsu, the text is incredibly dry.
It is basically just an abstract, repetitive list of names.
This deity begat this deity. Who begat this deity? There is no plot.
There is no setting, no mountains, no rivers.
Because it is a transcription of a purely oral tradition.
Right. It reads exactly like an oral history that has been pushed to the absolute breaking point of human memory.
When you don't have writing, you can't remember complex narratives over hundreds of years.
You just use rote memorization to preserve the lineage to prove who is related to who. It's flat.
But then, observe what happens the moment Izanagi, the Jofutsu figure, enters the narrative structure.
The text absolutely explodes.
Suddenly it's in 3D, there is dynamic action, there is highly specific geography.
They are standing on islands, looking at rivers, naming mountains.
There is complex dialogue, deep emotion, betrayal, creation, grief.
The narrative goes from a flat spreadsheet of names to a rich, lived-in world. Why does that happen?
That shift is not just an organic evolution of storytelling style.
It is not simply a myth getting more elaborate.
What you are seeing on the page is the physical footprint of a new technology arriving in the culture.
The power of the pen.
Precisely. Jofutsu didn't just bring farmers, engineers, and soldiers.
He brought scribes. He brought the bureaucratic apparatus of the continent.
He brought Han characters, ink, brushes, and inkstones.
And once again, we don't have to guess. Physical history backs this up entirely.
Archaeologists have discovered physical stone inkstones at sites like Tawayama that date back precisely to this era.
And finding a stone inkstone is huge.
Because stone is durable. It proves they were grinding ink, which means they were writing on materials like wood slips or silk.
They weren't just relying on spoken stories anymore.
This infusion of writing technology caused a fundamental paradigm shift.
It transitioned the civilization of Yamato from a society of memory to a society of physical records.
Think about the vulnerability of a society of memory. If a plague hits, or a war wipes out the elders, the entire history of a people, their laws, their lineage, their agricultural knowledge.
It all vanishes in a single generation. It is incredibly fragile.
But when you introduce writing, you create what we call a time axis.
A time axis. Let's unpack that.
You secure your history in a physical medium that outlasts the fragile human mind. You lay down a concrete foundation.
With a time axis, you can create a continuous bureaucracy.
You can build an administrative memory that allows you to govern vast distances and multiple generations.
Word of mouth can be debated, erased, or forgotten.
But written laws, written lineages, written history, these become the unshakable, permanent foundation of a state.
It is the dividing line between a temporary settlement that eventually disappears back into the jungle and an eternal nation that stands the test of time.
The tools of administration, the ability to physically record your own existence and your own laws.
That is what truly anchors a civilization.
It was the ultimate final act of survival. By bringing the technology of writing, Jofutsu ensured that the Eastern Yi lineage, the culture of the peaceful, innovative Huang system that Qin Shi Huang tried so desperately to obliterate,
would never be erased. He wrote them into permanence.
This has been an unbelievable journey today. We have covered an immense amount of ground looking at the very physical mechanics of history.
Let's bring it all together.
We started with Jofutsu, a brilliant intellectual trapped on death row by a violently paranoid dictator.
He weaponizes the legal code itself, using a bureaucratic petition for Zaiji
Administrative release.
to manipulate his way into commanding a state-funded fleet.
Over 9 years, he secures the Liandu, the repeating crossbow, legally extracting the apex military technology of the age to guarantee his people's future security.
He sails into the treacherous waters of Genkainada and engages in a high-stakes diplomatic summit with the great deity of Taka Amahara.
And they engineer a brilliant alibi, a fake toll, that allows Jofutsu to return to the continent and rescue 3,000 royal youths of the Eastern Yi lineage.
Along with the master artisans.
They cross the sea, pulling the local population back from climate-induced starvation with the miracle of wet rice cultivation.
They use advanced continental civil engineering to terraform the vast, dangerous peat bogs of the Onga River Basin into a thriving agricultural empire.
Leaving a trail of Kamakambo clay jars in the soil.
And most profoundly, they bring Han characters in inkstones, establishing a permanent time axis for the civilization of Yamato.
It is a staggering multi-generational legacy built on sheer tactical brilliance.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
We so often hear the cliché that history is written by the conquerors.
By the empires with the biggest armies who win the wars, burn the books, and crush their enemies, much like the Qin dynasty tried to do.
But the physical reality of Zhou life asks us to consider a much more profound truth.
Perhaps the most enduring, resilient parts of human history aren't actually written by the conquerors at all.
Perhaps they are written by the exiles, by the people who have the vision to recognize when a system is violently collapsing around them.
The people who possess the sheer, breathtaking audacity to pack up the very best of their civilization.
Its seeds, its science, its engineering, its children, and its words.
And sail across a dangerous, unknown sea to plant it anew in fertile soil.
The conqueror builds a monument of stone and fear that eventually crumbles into dust. But the exile plants a seed that grows into a forest that lasts millennia.
That is a powerful way to look at it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary physical history of Jōfutsu. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the myths, and keep exploring the hidden, tangible layers of the history that surrounds us every day. Until next time.